Hey everyone, this is Sellers.
And this is Stormy.
And this is Unforgotten,
where each episode will highlight unsolved missing, murdered, and suspicious death cases in Alabama in order to raise awareness and hopefully obtain some answers for victims and their families.
Please remember that any individual referenced in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law, and any opinions or views expressed in the podcast are solely those of participants. Listener discretion is advised, as some of the content discussed in the podcast may contain violence or graphic descriptions and may not be suitable for all audiences.
Be sure to join our Unforgotten Patreon channel today to gain exclusive benefits, including early access to ad-free episodes and bonus content. By subscribing, you'll also be supporting the efforts of ACCA in assisting families and raising awareness for Alabama cold cases.
Hey guys, and welcome back. Hey Stormy.
Hey.
Did you know that milk is the fastest liquid?
It is?
It is. It's pasteurized before you see it.
Oh, I like that one. That's pretty good. That's clever.
I like that one.
Oh, very good.
So last week, instead of covering a specific case, we did the episode a little different and had what we called Unforgotten Talk. We hope that you found it enjoyable and interesting, and we're planning to do episodes similar to that in the future, but hopefully with more in-depth updates and maybe some more positive developments.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to actually having something like really good happen.
Yes, and actually getting a response one day from some of the agencies that we've contacted.
Yes, that too. I feel like we're compiling quite a list.
Even if it was just to give us an update on the status. You feel like you know the status, but it would just be nice to have somebody confirm it.
Yeah. And I'd like to, they seem willing, the ones that, actually respond in any way, even if they can't tell you anything. They generally are responsive to giving a statement like, this case is an open and active investigation. If you have any tips, blah, 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 that kind of thing. It'd be nice to be able to get that statement like recorded or quote them just even on that.
Yeah, because, one of the problems I think happens a lot is that a lot of these cases, like the one that we're talking about today, happened so long ago that a lot of times the fact that it's still unsolved kind of leaves people's minds. And so if it's not actively out there in the news cycle, then people forget they are still looking for answers or that somebody's still missing. And
right.
I think it's helpful to occasionally at least do these updates to remind people, hey, we're still looking for things. If you remember something, saw something, heard something, get it to us.
Yep. And I find myself not even being really nice about it. Like, I think the last couple of updates, we were kind of like, don't wait. Get it in.
I know.
And don't mean to be rude, but, it kind of comes to that point. It's that whole silence is betrayal. And if you know something, say something,
Yeah, we're not trying to be pushy, but we are.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure y'all understand that.
I think it's too because we've talked to so many families at this point, and a lot of times all they want is to know.
Mm-hmm. We've talked to some families who literally say they don't even care if they find out who did it or what the details were, if they could just bring their loved one home.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I talked to somebody last night that said that exact thing. Mm-hmm. At this point, they didn't even care really what happened. They just wanted to know where their sister was and bring her home because it was killing them not knowing.
Yep.
So tell you again, get that information in.
I just feel so sorry for these families.
I mean, you take the life of their loved one, or somebody takes the life of their loved one, or they're holding them against their will. That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very cruel for some of these families that have gone for so many years, especially if the likelihood that their perpetrator is even alive is slim, and there are people out there who knew. I wish they'd understand that it's still important.
Agreed. So in the meantime, for this episode, we're going to be sharing a case from Franklin County. And this is the case of 5-year-old Andrea Gonzalez, who went missing 30 years ago from Russellville, Alabama.
If listening to Unforgotten has inspired you to create your own podcast, you're in luck. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can make your own podcast and share it with the world.
And the Spotify platform makes it super easy to get started. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. So no matter where you are when an idea hits, you're ready to start recording.
Spotify for Podcasters makes it easy to distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Plus, you can do video podcasts and engage with fans through Q&A and polls. You can even earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions.
And best of all, it's free. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters and sign up for your free account to start recording and sharing your podcast with the world. Franklin County has an estimated population of 31,932, and in 2021, its county seat, Russellville, had a population of 10,789. This is where our case is going to take us today. Obviously, Russellville has almost the majority of the population.
It does, yep. And they noted that in the website, that a third of the population or something. Yeah, which makes sense if I do math.
I saw that you had also found something about a watermelon festival.
That's right. Russellville's downtown hosts an annual watermelon festival every August with music and entertainment. They have like a car and tractor show, arts and crafts. I know, a car and tractor. They have those where I am too, so you can't laugh too much about the car and tractor show.
I hear about car shows all the time, but I've never heard about a tractor show.
Okay, so where I am, well, not exactly where I am, but where I've lived, they actually have what they call tractor days. And so it's not just a Southern thing, I'm telling you.
I was going to ask, are you sure?
Kids can get up and like ride in the big machinery, and it's like a big, like kind of a well, not a carnival, but you know, like a little festival thing. It's pretty cool, actually, because I know some people that go to it every year, and they just love it.
So do they have, like, souped-up tractors?
Not. Yeah, I think they have. I think that, like, they may bring in some big, you know, what do you call it? Kind of like monster trucks, but not quite. But I think most of it's just the, like, giving them an experience of getting on these big tractors, because kids love dump trucks and tractors, you know? So... yeah, it's pretty neat. I kind of always wished, because I didn't know about it until after my kids were grown. I was like, oh, that would be what would have been really fun with my kids to go to those, actually. But anyway.
Now I'm going to be searching for one.
Yeah. They also have a county pageant at the Watermelon Festival. And so I don't know much about that, but it looked like they had it for all different age groups. So that was kind of interesting. And of course, on top of that, everything watermelon. So, you know, you can just take that for what it is. I'm sure that they had watermelon foods and crafts.
I bet they do the watermelon crawl.
They did. They have a contest on like growing the watermelons, I believe.
Oh, like who can get the biggest
like the
one?
size. Size and colors and things like that, I think. I don't remember exactly what all the details were of it, but I thought that's kind of fun.
I love
watermelon.
My grandfather used to grow moon and star watermelons.
Oh, yum.
Yeah, I think they look really
Those
cool.
might be hard to, they're hard to grow from what I remember. That's pretty cool that he It's also not very far from Upper Bear Creek Reservoir, which is also known to people as Upper Bear Lake. This lake will actually come into play later in our episode.
The story of Andrea's disappearance is a heart-wrenching one. And to truly understand it, we need to delve into the complicated and tumultuous history of her life and her family. Michelle and Paul Gonzalez had a rocky start to their marriage, and it seems pretty clear that their relationship was not always a happy one. They were both very young, only teenagers, when they got married, at least based on what we've read, and it seems they were ill-equipped to handle the challenges of parenthood and marriage. Michelle and Paul were married shortly before Michelle gave birth to their first child, a precious baby boy named Anthony, in 1986. However, in 1987, Michelle and Paul found themselves in a bitter court battle with Michelle's mother, Garnett Melton, who accused the couple of abandoning Anthony. According to the February 1995 Birmingham News article, Michelle's mother was ultimately awarded custody of Anthony.
Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it, what made her think that they abandoned Anthony?
And there wasn't a lot of information about that outside of in that newspaper article. And a lot of times records that relate to children aren't public. They try to keep that out. I did
kind of wonder if maybe it was just had something to do with how young they were, and maybe, they were young, so they were doing what young people do, like trying to go out and leave her with the grandma all the time or something. I don't know. Could be more than that. I don't know.
It could be more than that. Then you kind of get into later into Andrea's case, and you see these kind of patterns with Paul, and you kind of think maybe that had something to do with it.
We'll talk more about that. Yeah.
And just a year after they lost custody of Anthony, on January 21st, 1988, Paul and Michelle brought home their second child, a beautiful baby girl named Andrea. A year after that, Michelle gave birth to their third child, another bouncing baby boy named Craig. Unfortunately, it seems like things had only grown worse in their marriage over the years, and at some point the couple split up and Paul moved to Russellville, Alabama, though it's not really clear to me which event actually occurred first. It seems like maybe Michelle did actually move to Alabama and then they split up.
Yeah, that was what I had read in a couple of them, but then there were others that seemed, to say kind of differently. So it was hard to really read into it exactly what order that happened in.
And the news article said that Paul claimed that Michelle had left him in 1989. He actually filed for divorce in 1990, which is something that has bugged me because, of course, we go to check the court records. We have something showing that he filed for divorce in 1990, but it is not publicly available.
Right.
So it makes it difficult to see what was actually alleged in those.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the Birmingham News maybe had actually gotten a copy of that back at the time that they wrote the article, because they're the ones that had written that Paul had claimed Michelle had left him in 89 and that he had no clue where she'd gone. And he also said that he was not Craig's father because she had left him in 1989. Birmingham News actually reported that Michelle had returned to Illinois where they began their life together. But it seems that her return there wasn't exactly happy either. Michelle's troubles in Illinois culminated in her serving time in jail and being put on probation for perjury. According to that same Birmingham News article, it was reported that Michelle had actually told a grand jury she'd been raped by 2 men, but she later recanted that statement and said she just wanted to get back at one of those men who she previously dated.
Interesting.
That led to her being charged with perjury and actually being sent to jail for a little while. While Michelle was serving her time in jail, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services stepped in and removed Andrea and her brother Craig from Michelle's custody and placed them in foster care. And it is absolutely heartbreaking to think about the fact that these 2 babies were taken from everyone they knew and were familiar with.
Yeah.
The tragic nature of the situation is further compounded by the fact there were indications suggesting that Andrea may have experienced sexual abuse prior to being taken into custody, though Michelle denies these claims. It's unclear where the allegations of abuse stem from, but it is clear that the lack of concern from Paul, paired with Michelle's instability, played a significant role in their placement in the foster care system. I think I actually read a comment from her mother that said it wasn't necessarily that she didn't necessarily think that Michelle had abused the kids. She just thought that she was, again, ill-equipped at that time to take care of them like she should.
Right.
So her mom didn't seem to think that Michelle could have been involved in any kind of abuse towards the kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it was ever proven. Everything I read just said there were indications.
I also wonder if it didn't have anything to do with the people that she was
Hanging around.
Was hanging around and living with, that sort of thing. I think I remember reading something about where she left for something and left the kids in care of friends. So I don't know if maybe that's where some of the allegations stem from.
That's also a possibility. It was reported by foster care officials that both Craig and Andrea had stomachs that were bloated with parasites, and that 2-year-old Andrea often threw tantrums, pulled out her hair, and used profanity.
That's some pretty strong indications of something really bad going on to me.
It really is. And at 2 years old, to know to use profane language means it's been heard somewhere, which we all know kids repeat things. Sometimes even when you don't want them to. But
they have to hear them.
They've got to hear it first.
No. Yeah.
Andrea and Craig bounced between foster homes for about a year before Craig was put up for adoption, which is another tragic detail in their very young lives. It's unclear whether a suitable family was found for Craig, but we hope that he found a wonderful and loving home, because the idea that he may have spent his life shuffled between foster homes is just almost too much to bear.
Yeah.
They had a rough start in their very short lives. And
I can't even imagine that. You don't realize that he is what?
A year younger
than her.
Andrea.
Yeah. So, 1.5 and 2 or 3 by the time that this is, yeah.
This history kind of leads us up to the time surrounding Andrea's disappearance, or at least how she got to Alabama. We can't truly understand what happened to Andrea without understanding the complex and troubled history of her family. And it's clear that Andrea was a victim of circumstance and that her life was marked by instability and trauma from a very young age.
Not long after divorcing Michelle, now living in the Bob Cummings trailer park and County Road 48, Paul was actually starting a new family. He had remarried to 19-year-old Kim Williams in February of 1991, after Kim also became pregnant with her first child, named Elizabeth, who was born in May of 1991. When Michelle had been released from her prison time, but had been missing her visitations with Andrea, DFS had contacted Paul to see if he would like Andrea to come live with him. He reportedly told Kim that she could decide. He didn't really care one way or the other.
And I think that is obviously true, because you have to think about he's here in Alabama while these children are just being shuffled around in Illinois, and obviously had no idea what was going on until he was contacted, you have to assume.
Yeah,
doesn't seem like he had contact with them. And that says a lot about the kind of dad he was.
I know. And can you imagine? I guess, at this point, Andrea's probably sort of getting used to living with or staying with new people, as much as a 2 and 3-year-old child can be used to that. But going to live with somebody who she probably hardly remembers as her father, and, then what's to come.
And the shuffling around could be part of what led to some of those behavioral issues.
I am sure it is. Kids act out when they don't know how to handle what's going on in their lives and how people care for them.
I don't know if you just put yourself into the place of essentially a toddler, and you're frequently waking up with new people that you don't know.
Yep. And we don't know how she was treated in each of those situations either.
Right.
So, Were they disciplinary? Did they ignore her? Did they, maybe they were great, some of them anyway, but, we just don't know. And we don't know what formed those emotional responses, I guess is what I'm getting at. Kim agreed, stating in interviews that she actually wanted to have Andrea come live with them, which she did in 1992. Articles kind of vary, but they all seem to say she was 3 years old. But if it was in 1992, unless it was right at the beginning of January, she would have been 4 years old, actually, at this point.
Yeah, because she was 5 when she went missing.
Mm-hmm. And her birthday is like late January. So yeah, it would have been pretty early in 1992 for that to have been accurate. And it could have been maybe, family services kind of did their thing at the beginning of the year or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I've seen a date for when she actually got to Alabama to live with them.
No, I haven't either. I mean, even some of the actual records we've had, they are vague on specific dates, some of them. But in the news articles, they kind of always round it up to either a month and a year or a year, which is kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
According to records, Paul and Kim's marriage was also unstable. And later on, Kim would report an ongoing barrage of mental, physical, and sexual abuse. Though the abuse was only a claim by Kim, it was probably supported because there were records of at least one hospital stay after an event that she sustained several injuries from. It included her being beat, strangled, and just several other actions that were just horrible.
And you kind of have to think that if this was happening with Kim, then probably happened with Michelle too. And maybe that was part of the issues back with Anthony whenever her mother was trying to get custody of him.
Yeah. I kind of wondered that too. If he had the same attitude towards the kids then that he had with Andrea coming to live with them, it wouldn't surprise me.
And the comment about him not caring one way or the other, that bothers me for a ton of reasons. But
me too.
The main one being they did have children in their household, so it wasn't like they were newlywed couples with no children just doing their own thing, and he was like, oh no, now I've got to take responsibility from a child. How did he treat them in comparison to each other? Was one favored over the other? Were they treated equally? Were they ignored equally? Did he not care about any of them equally?
Andrea was apparently, and of course understandably, likely suffering from some form of PTSD from her short life already. She had developed behavioral issues such as screaming, foul language, pulling her hair out, and going to the bathroom on the floor. She was also said to have learned to force herself to throw up when she was upset. I just can't even imagine that as a 3-year-old kid, probably before then even, if she had developed that and that was kind of her go-to. That's awful for that young of a child to even think of putting your fingers down your throat and making yourself throw up.
All of this just is so sad. That any kid would have to go through this. We say that a lot of times about children in general, but I don't know. There's just something about Andrea and her story and her sibling's story that just has really been weighing heavily on me.
Yeah, it really is. There are some stories that kind of, I don't know, they all bother me. They all make me sad for the families and for the victim, but sometimes they just grab you and kind of yank at your heart a little bit more than some of the others sometimes. And this is one of them for me.
Because you don't want to think about that for her 5 years of life, or up to this point, we said she was probably 4, that she really probably didn't know a whole lot about what it meant to have somebody really love her and treat her like she should have been treated, like a human being, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of those in the headlines right now. You know, there's Oakley Carlson, there's Summer
Wills.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be a kind of recurrence. There was, I don't know if you saw, but there was just an announcement. There was another gal named Oakley, little child, that went missing recently, and they found her deceased in the woods.
She was found in Indianapolis.
Yeah. Also, according to records, Kim would later claim that Paul would favor Elizabeth over Andrea. Andrea would get yelled at and spanked often by Paul for her behavior, even if she had already been punished. And Kim never at least seemed to believe when she had interviews that Paul ever sexually abused Andrea, but she did say in a record in a neuro evaluation that she did doubt herself somewhat when he made a comment to her about Andrea messing with herself, which in and of itself bothers me a little bit. It's not uncommon for kids to do things, but in this circumstance, it kind of bothers me a little bit more. And it bothers me that he would make kind of an offhanded comment like that. So I could see why she would doubt it.
I think it's normal as kids become more aware of themselves for them to be curious in general, but it's the way that he went about making the comment, maybe.
Yep.
And knowing that there had already been this history and the claims that she could have been sexually abused that make you really think that's an odd statement that probably should have raised some red flags, or probably would have raised red flags.
Yeah. And you kind of wonder, with the way that we know that he treated Kim, if maybe she did kind of wonder, but kind of suppressed it. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's indications in some of the records we looked at, which we're not getting into today, but there's indications that maybe Kim was afraid of Paul.
Yeah.
And maybe that is somewhat why she wouldn't have maybe been so forthcoming. We already know that she had the record where he had beaten her. So, it stands to reason that she would likely also think that she would be punished for saying things that could be harmful towards him.
So this is where our story really takes a turn. Nearing the holidays on November 20th, 1993, at about 7:25 a.m., the Russellville Police Department and the Franklin County Sheriff's Office were notified by Kim and Paul that their now 5-year-old daughter, Andrea, had disappeared. They feared she had wandered off out of the house in the night, or maybe was abducted. They had reported that Andrea was last seen between 12 midnight and 12:30 a.m. that same morning. Paul stated that he had gone into her room around 6:30 a.m. and she was gone. They claimed to have looked for her around the trailer park and then reported her missing.
Didn't they even try to say at one point that they thought maybe Michelle had taken her?
I did read something that they were kind of like, well, maybe that's what happened, I can't remember exactly what came. I mean, like if they actually had somebody go ask her, I'm sure that probably they questioned her. But
yeah, I remember reading that the police did question her as far as did she have her with her. But I thought it was kind of odd that was their first thought. Oh, her mom came.
Yeah.
And got her. And yeah, and then because I do remember reading something about that they had checked with several relatives just to see, was she with any of the relatives? And no, of course she wasn't, but
you never know. And of course, law enforcement had no clue at this point. So
I guess that would answer the question about whether or not Michelle moved with Paul, because how else would she have known where they lived?
That's true. I mean, I guess technically they could know, I suppose, if they kept in touch at all. But it kind of got the impression that they didn't keep in touch at all. So, yeah, I think you're right.
You would have to think they didn't, because
Mm-hmm.
surely, but this goes back to that discussion earlier, he would have had some idea of what was going on with the kids before, Department of Family Services called them.
Absolutely. Yep. And, we did see articles saying that she did, that they all moved before, she moved back to Illinois, or back to Peoria, I think it was. Just not all of them said that. Some of them said it, just kind of didn't really say anything about it.
Yeah, that was the one thing that it wasn't clear.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just assumed that she probably did, since he said she had left him and then he didn't know where she'd went. So I kind of just assumed maybe, but there was never really a clear answer on when he moved to Alabama and who moved with them.
Right. So immediately, the sheriff and the local police departments launched a full-scale search with hundreds of volunteers searching approximately 40-mile radius around the Gonzalez trailer. This went on for about 2 days and included search dogs. However, the bloodhounds couldn't pick up any sign of Andrea beyond the Gonzalez's front porch. By the second day, authorities became a little suspicious of foul play. And as usual, their first suspect in any case would be the parents, and Paul and Kim became the focus.
I wonder, talking about the bloodhounds not picking up any sign of her beyond the front porch, were these, what I would like to know, because obviously we don't have the answer here, but were they looking for live scent? Did they bring cadaver dogs in?
Yeah.
Especially whenever they began to consider something's not quite right about this.
Right.
Did they come back with cadaver dogs to see if the reason that they couldn't find her scent was because she was no longer alive when she left the front porch? Because you would think they've been living in this house. Her scent should have been all over the yard.
You would think. Yeah. And I don't know, I didn't see anything other than, this kind of said the way it was. The Alabama Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigation were brought in to help, and the investigators started interviewing witnesses. Witnesses reported seeing Kim Gonzalez mistreat or abuse Andrea, supposedly anyway. I am not surprised to hear that. However, we don't really hear much beyond that people saw that. Do you remember reading anything other than that?
No, I read some newspaper articles about the trial. I think the AP actually had a reporter that maybe sat in on the trials for the whole time, because it looked like all of the newspaper articles that came out around the time all were just basically resharing that whatever AP had written.
Yeah.
And I could have missed it, but I remember there being specifically one witness who was a coworker, who made that allegation. But they didn't really say anything about whether there were more people that claimed they had seen that happen, or if it was just this one person. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not particularly surprised to hear that there were people that reported that, just given the circumstances as a whole.
I agree.
And you would think that people wouldn't just make that up.
No, I kind of wonder what they meant by it, because they never elaborated in anything I read. Tips kept coming in and searches took place as well. The investigation continued until February of 1995, when a likely unexpected but also possibly unsurprising development occurred. On February 14th, 1995, Kim Gonzalez voluntarily gave a statement to investigator Target, which implicated herself in Andrea's disappearance and involvement in her death.
So it seems like I remember reading something about the story of Susan Smith actually being what prompted her to come forward. But then you said I misread it, and that was actually why she didn't come forward.
Right, exactly.
And for those of you who don't remember or maybe don't know, Susan Smith was a mom who claimed that she'd been carjacked, and that the man that had carjacked her had taken off with her 2 young sons. I think they were 14 months and 3. And for 9 days, she begged for their return. But then it turned out that there wasn't actually a carjacker. She actually had left her children in her car and rolled her car into a lake in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So I think there was a lot of publicity around that at the time.
There was. It was like one of the first filicide cases that was out there that was really big. And I can imagine, I mean, not that I would ever do what she did, but I would be scared to come out at that time too.
People aren't particularly fond of people who harm children.
Mm-mm.
And you see a lot of really nasty stuff come out, from people who don't know. They have no idea who the person is, didn't know them from Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure she sat there and saw all of that and thought, this is going to be me.
Yeah. Well, and, you have to think, especially, we'll get into what her story was about what happened. But, if she felt like it was an accidental thing and that was all going on around her at the time, nobody would believe her. They would just think that she did it on purpose. And
not that it makes any of it right.
It doesn't.
Obviously.
No. Yeah.
But I think it's even worse that this had been going on for 2 years almost.
Mm-hmm. Yep. According to reports, on November 19th, Kim and her family went for groceries, dinner, and a drive, and returned home around 10-ish or so. Before they went to bed around 10:30, Paul took a Valium and smoked some marijuana. Later that night, Kim found Andrea in the bathroom vomiting. Apparently, Kim ran a bath for her, and she was cleaning up the mess on the floor, according to her story, and, plops Andrea in the tub. Well, that's when Andrea starts complaining about hot bath water. So she kind of turns around, and I think the idea is that she thought that Andrea was just complaining because she didn't want to be in there. But when she actually then went to start washing her, she realized how hot the water was, and picks her up and takes her out of the water and immediately starts putting medicine on Andrea's burns, gave her some Sunny Delight and Tylenol, and put her in her bedroom. I think she probably was freaking out a little bit at this point. I would be.
And how do you get bath water for a child that hot?
I have been in apartments where they haven't turned the thermostat down on the water heaters. And if you have no, like if you go to turn a bath water on and you think, I'm going to turn the hot water on until it gets hot, and then I'm going to turn the cold water up to, even it out. But maybe she didn't turn the cold water on.
Well, but you don't check it.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly
before
right.
You put yourself or anybody in. I've ran my bath water too hot before and stuck a foot in there and thought, nope, hang on, let me put some cold water in there. So I couldn't imagine just running this water with a child and not testing it before just blindly putting them in.
Yeah.
I mean, bath water and water in general can get really hot. They've got that warning on the hot water heater that shows you, like, don't turn it too hot. Because it's got I think it shows somebody, like, with some big, warning sign over it with somebody touching the water, It just, and how long was she in? It had to be really hot.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would have had to been really hot, but I mean, if she was in there and she was kind of ignoring her complaining, then she was probably in there for enough time for it to even be worse, I mean, I think if you'd plopped a child into hot water like that and then pulled her out immediately, she might have gotten a little bit of surface burn, but she probably wouldn't have got burn. Sitting in it for any amount of time, I'm sure she was not in good shape. So
that's just sad.
Yeah. Well, Kim checked on her a little bit later, and when she saw her, she had found that she had actually passed away. So she panicked. And so she disposed of her body by placing it in a garbage bag, actually 2, attaching a cement block with a cord.
3 garbage bags, actually.
Oh, I didn't catch the 3rd one.
That's a lot of thought.
That's a lot of thought, yep. I mean...
So why wouldn't you call 911?
Yeah, I know. I mean, it was an accident.
It's supposed to be an accident, and why not call...
Yeah.
She's unresponsive, but that doesn't mean she couldn't be revived.
Yeah.
If the story's true.
Yeah, if the story's true. Well, once she had put this contraption together and wrapped her up, she drove down to the I think it's Mondi Bridge at Upper Bear Lake and threw her off the bridge. Which, all of it's horrible. I'm just... It just makes me just almost horrified that any of that happened.
I just can't even wrap my mind around being able to think that through.
Yeah.
To come up with that plan. You're panicking, but you're obviously rational enough to come up with this plan because you have to drive. You have to drive to get to this place. And it never occurred on the way there. This isn't right.
Yeah.
Or was it like, we're too far in now? I'm too far in, whoever. And I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
There's always a choice.
There is. Yep. And I have some ideas about this that we'll kind of get into the meaning of all this in the first place, because I think there's more to this story. But
I'll just say it off the bat, I don't believe the story.
Yeah,
I just don't believe it.
Well, not only do I not believe it, but even though I think it's possible that something near that scenario happened, I don't think it happened in the way it did and without help.
Right.
Kim seemingly cooperated with the investigators. She showed them where she claimed to have dumped Andrea. And though they didn't have any details yet, the media reported that Kim had been arrested for murder. And so right away, searchers set up tents and heaters at Upper Bear Lake, and divers started searching and with roving cameras and sonar devices for 2 days trying to locate Andrea. They actually had dogs on site, I believe, as well. I just can't, 2 years had passed. Yeah, 2 years had passed. And they're now trying to locate a garbage bag with some remains in it. At the jail, Kim reportedly tells Paul what had happened to Andrea. Personnel state that he looked like he was in shock. So Paul went down to the lake to watch the search activities, and per a Birmingham News article on February 16th during the searches, he states, "I feel like I've lost my best friend. I stood by my wife's side through all of this. I defended her and yelled at people, and now I've got to bury my daughter." Later, he recounts to the press the night that Andrea disappears, telling how he used the Valium and marijuana and was in a deep sleep that night, and how worried Kim seemed. He also manages to bring up that he plans to divorce her now and seek custody of the 2 remaining kids.
So, back early on in the investigation, they administered polygraph tests to both of them, and then Kim didn't pass hers, and they said that it was because she was pregnant and it was the stress and all of that stuff. And then she wanted to take another one, but the doctors had told her they didn't think it was a good idea. So that meant she couldn't take another one. And then, although I do think she ultimately did end up taking one, Paul's first one was inconclusive. And they were like, he didn't say he wasn't going to take one. He didn't refuse one. He just said that he needed some rest. He was tired, and then, we could reschedule it.
Yeah, he played it off like the stress of everything, that finding out about this and all that, like a father is really stressed out. that's kind of the way he played it.
And well, then I read a newspaper article that was really kind of confusing because it says everybody passed their polygraph.
Oh, I didn't read that. She did. Huh.
Yeah, because I wrote it down and I'm like, wait, this is a completely different story than what was originally reported.
It is one thing I've noticed so far in this, that there's a thread of the same story through most of the different articles, but there are some conflicting information threads throughout it, you know.
Yeah. So I don't know whether she passed the polygraph or not. I'm going to lean more towards she did not.
I don't think she did.
Just because that was talked about so much.
Mm-hmm. So Wednesday, the 15th of February, divers did find a plastic garbage bag with a gel-like substance next to a concrete block on the bottom of the lake. But, unfortunately, bad weather prevents them from bringing it up. Cadaver dogs at this point reportedly also alert near the site, and divers did end up bringing a piece of the bag up for testing. And so, what I read was that because of the weather and the shift, the currents under the water and that sort of thing, that there was some big boulders down underneath it there. And so they were starting to shift, and one actually ended up kind of rolling. I don't think the guy got hurt badly, but it did kind of roll onto one of the divers, so they couldn't continue. Yeah. So they eventually, have to bring in big machinery in order to do this. And then, they kind of like shore up, I guess, somehow where the rocks are. I don't know how they do all that, but then there isn't a whole lot more information about the search itself. They do actually test the bag piece, and they do find a hair in it. I imagine, how many hairs do you find in a public lake? But
yeah.
And it did say the tests were inconclusive.
But how many do you find with the garbage bag?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So it is suspicious for sure. I mean, it seems like that could possibly be it. It was with a concrete block, in the vicinity at least. I don't know exactly how close it was. We don't have pictures. But
I agree with you. It could have been anybody's hair, but I wonder if they've ever tried to redo that testing. We've talked about several times now how advanced technology's become.
Yeah.
So if it was inconclusive to begin with, could it possibly make a determination now? Yeah,
I kind of wonder that. It would be a good question to ask if we were able to get a response from law enforcement.
They found one hair?
It says a hair when in the article. So I'm not sure really if it was like a long strand of hair, and that's why it was easy, to say it was a hair. I don't know. Seems pretty amazing. There would only be one.
We can get these records.
I do too.
That's like a needle in a haystack.
I mean, I guess if, there might have been more than one if they only took a piece of the garbage bag. But
yeah,
to me, the thing that caught me about taking a piece of the garbage bag is that, I guess if she wrapped it 3 times around Andrea, 3 bags, then I guess they could probably pull a piece of the garbage bag off without puncturing it if it wasn't already punctured. I don't even know how they know there's a gel-like substance. You can't open that underwater, otherwise it would just go away. It would come out of the bag. So I'm not really sure how they determined all of that information and where they took the sample from without puncturing the bags. So it kind of, I, again, would love to know that if they have that in the records.
We've had a couple of people say that they had family members that worked on the dive team.
Oh, yeah.
During this time. So if any of them would be willing to talk to us and about what they remember, that would be fantastic.
And if you haven't already, and you are one of the people that commented on our post earlier, there's still time to talk to us. So if you, we do have
we've got part 2 coming next week.
So yeah, we'd appreciate any input. Even if you don't think for sure it's fact, but yeah, please message us, send an email through our website. There is a phone number on our website or on our Facebook page as well. Well, on our website too. So get a hold of us, please. At the lake, Sheriff Larry Plott told the media that there had been an informant leading to some of the search efforts, and also to a potential witness in Texas that may have been there when Andrea went missing. Andrea's mother, Michelle, also went to the lake and had what appears to be a heated exchange with Paul, but she wouldn't talk to the press at the time. Her mother, on the other hand, did comment to the press about her disappointment in her daughter's life decisions and that they all led to this being able to happen to Andrea in the first place. I got the impression that Michelle's mom really had no love lost for these people.
No, doesn't sound like it.
Finally, on Friday, February 24th, 1995, divers brought up 2 bags from the lake. One was empty and one contains a small object. Unfortunately, the bags did not yield any evidence of Andrea.
I want to know what this small object was.
Yeah. And again, they don't elaborate on what the small object was. It's kind of interesting because they don't really, and it could be, law enforcement doesn't always tell the public everything. So, it could just be that this is something they're holding on to until they have more evidence. But really, you would think that we would have heard more about that. But all we hear is that it wasn't Andrea.
It must not have been anything, or maybe it was something helpful, but maybe it was actually unrelated because they do move forward with the charges.
Yeah.
So
by the end of February 1995, Sheriff Plott and the authorities decided to move forward with the murder case against Kim. She was to remain free on bond until they could bring official charges. The condition was that she would meet with authorities periodically as needed and cooperate with questioning. 7 months after Kim's confession, when he was brought in for questioning, Paul confessed that he was actually the one who disposed of Andrea's body. His retelling of the story was different, but it still ended up with him dropping Andrea's body in the lake off Monday Bridge.
Isn't that convenient timing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She won't, almost 7 months later, she's not giving any more information, and now he's confessing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
that can't be a coincidence.
No. There's a lot of things in this that lead me to believe that Paul had plans. Once all this started, evolving, I guess I think he had some plans on how to handle it as it unfolded.
Well, it makes you wonder too, is the reason that she stopped giving information because if she gave more information, it would implicate Paul. And then that comes back on her because now he's being blamed because of something she said.
Yep.
Or maybe she had already said, which results in his questioning. And now it's just chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
In their house, which it was chaos before. But
yeah,
she takes all the blame to begin with. And now suddenly it's changing. And is it because she was giving information when she told stop giving that information?
Right. And we know already that she is likely afraid of him. So,
yeah,
in my thinking at this point, I would say that, she was taking the fall for him, or at least in part, she was taking the full blame, maybe, for what happened.
I don't think that she was, I don't in any way think that she was completely innocent of
neither.
it.
Yeah.
Because she has a lot of details. Part of that, we've talked about that just kind of amongst ourselves before, that part of things are kind of just trying to figure out what is the truth and what's being told. Mm-hmm. Because
sometimes
a lot of times the truth is threaded through there, like you said. Yeah. And the hardest part is pulling out the lies from it to see which details are actually true.
Yeah. And sometimes that makes it easier for manipulative, shall I say, psychopaths or sociopaths to weave truth in so their story is more believable. I've also heard that people who can do that actually often will pass their polygraphs if they're cunning enough to be able to do that with forethought. So, and I don't know, some people it's because they believe part of it because part of it is true, so.
Yeah. Well, I actually heard in a podcast this week. I'm trying to remember which one. I kind of think it was, Why Can't We Talk About Amanda's Mom? Where they were interviewing somebody and this person just volunteers up that someone else has told them how to pass polygraph. And they go into like detail about how they can pass a polygraph.
Wow.
And who knows whether or not that was true, you know. I've never been given a polygraph. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's part of why they're not admissible.
Right. You know, part of it also is, it depends on who's giving the polygraph as well.
Mm-hmm.
If the person that administers it is very, very schooled in it, has done, enough of them that they've seen the behaviors of a lot of people. If they have a lot of back training on other, psychology and, all these things, some people just simply administer a test, and some people actually talk to the person beforehand and explain things to them and kind of, have a conversation with them and tell them what they're going to have, what kind of questions they're going to have. And then they ask the test. And it's very interesting to see different people do it different ways, because I think the ones that actually take the time to do more in-depth conversations with the person that they're doing the polygraph with tend to have the better results.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's very interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody could pass a poly if they had somebody who wasn't really doing that in-depth of a polygraph in the first place. Following his confession, divers resumed searching the lake not far from the area previously searched, which, again, turned up nothing. There were several attempts and no Andrea. One more notable search took place years later in February 2004. Sheriff Plott stated he received a tip that Andrea's body could be found underneath a house in Muscle Shoals, that she had been moved there sometime after her death. Authorities used search dogs again and removed bags of debris from a cellar there. They found no skeletal remains and committed to examining everything they took from the cellar, but they never revealed if they found any evidence that she could have been there. And I understand there was like sunglasses. There was all kinds of stuff, that like garbage that they brought up from there. There was lots of things they would have had to go through and test. If they tested anything, I don't know. It was kind of odd.
It is kind of odd. And
like, who gave that tip?
Yeah, that would be good to know.
Yeah. Franklin County grand juries issued indictments on both Kim and Paul. And Sellers, do you want to give us a rundown on what the charges were?
Yeah, because it's kind of odd, and we'll get into that next time. But in September of 1995, Kim was indicted on charges of capital murder. And that capital murder charge came from murdering Andrea by scalding her in hot water. Well, then in April of 1997, I'm not sure if they called back the original grand jury or if they convened a new one yet. I'm still looking at that. But a grand jury came in and they indicted her on 4 additional charges. This is almost 2 years later. It was an additional charge of capital murder for intentionally denying treatment, a murder charge for manifesting extreme indifference to human life and recklessly engaging in conduct that created a grave risk, manslaughter for recklessly causing Andrea's death by failing to provide medical treatment, and then a 4th charge of child abuse for denying medical treatment or otherwise mistreating Andrea when she was in Kim's care, custody, or supervision. Paul only received an indictment on capital murder. Well, since there had been so much publicity around the case, and we talked about, how heated things can get when there are children involved.
Yeah.
Kim and Paul both requested a change of venue. They wanted the trials moved out of Franklin County. So Kim's case ended up being moved to Butler County, and Paul's case ends up being moved to Pike County. And I think the reasoning behind that was that they didn't want Paul's trial to be held in the same county where Kim's trial was going to be held. At this point, we've heard 2 different stories about what actually happened to Andrea, and they couldn't try them together.
Yeah.
But then whoever's trial comes afterwards, it's going to be a lot harder to get an unbiased jury, because no matter the circumstances, we're in America and everybody is entitled to a fair trial.
Correct, yeah.
And that getting an unbiased jury is really important. And making sure that they don't have any preconceived notions. They don't come in with some kind of, idea, even if it doesn't make them prejudicial. You don't want them having some kind of knowledge that they could possibly use when considering the evidence that's been presented to them.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand why they split it to 2 separate counties. I think that was probably a good call. But before Paul could go to trial, he made a deal to testify against Kim in exchange for a reduced sentence. Paul ended up pleading guilty to a manslaughter charge and receiving a 10-year sentence, which only required that he serve 2 years in prison and then 2 years of probation once he was released. 2 years.
2 years.
In prison. Andrea doesn't have 2 years, Trials did get heated. Like we talked about, the public was enraged. It got so heated that there was a woman who was arrested for harassing and threatening Rebecca Thomason, who was reported to have been representing the Gonzalez early in the matter. Now, this is something we're going to discuss next time, but there was a question raised at trial about whether Rebecca ever, in fact, represented Kim and or Paul. And it's so important to note because it appears that most people believe that Rebecca at least represented Kim. The newspapers reference her attorney, Rebecca Thomason, Rebecca Green Thomason. People are calling and threatening her. Like, I think they said the threat even actually was that whoever the woman was, it said her name. Mm-hmm. I'm not putting her name in there. Mm-hmm. Had threatened to kill her. I don't know what happened to that. That's why I don't want to put her name out there because I didn't get a chance to look and see what actually happened with her charges.
And it could have been blown out of proportion too.
It could have been. Mm-hmm. That's something we would have to look into, and she did get arrested. So I didn't want to not say it, but it was because it's just kind of an example of how kind of polarized everything was.
Yeah. Yeah. And didn't we, I feel like even in the press, I feel like they mention Rebecca filing motions. I feel like I've seen it in the paperwork, but I can't remember if I'm just conflating that as well. So,
she asked to withdraw. She filed a motion to withdraw. Yeah.
So there you are.
So during Kim's trial, Paul claimed that Kim had abused pills and had been unfaithful before Andrea had disappeared. Sounds familiar, right?
Mm-hmm.
He acknowledged that they'd had their fair share of fights, and even some had turned physical, but he denied all claims that Kim was afraid of him. Janetta Davis, a former coworker of Kim's, claimed that she saw Kim beating Andrea with a stick and actually reported it to DHR. However, it was reported at the time that there was actually no record of that report, so unsure whether there was any witnesses at all to Kim beating Andrea.
Mm-hmm.
The Butler County jury, after hearing everything, acquitted Kim on all the charges except child abuse. And there were several arguments that were made by the prosecutor and the defense. Of course, the defense, their main thing was that Kim was afraid of Paul. And the prosecutors argued that wasn't the case. So we'll get into that a little bit next time and kind of go over what the foundations of their arguments were.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting to kind of see how Paul turns against Kim.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah. You could argue that he did from the start because he was letting her take the fall to begin with.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are things that are said in those court records that make really kind of further that belief I have that the story that was given isn't right. And that while Kim may have been involved, I don't think that she was innocent. I said that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
There are details that you would think Kim would have or know, should know, that she doesn't. So it's interesting. After the trials, the Limestone County DA, James Fry, questioned the entire account given by Kim and Paul. He's heard everything at this point. So after everything's said and done, after the trials are over, he says, based upon the limited answers to questions we had on tape, it was the examiner's opinion that they were untruthful about throwing the child off the bridge. Personally, I've always thought that perhaps the child has been buried in a shallow grave somewhere, or perhaps a mine shaft in or around Franklin County.
Yep.
Kind of in support of that, Kim's attorney, David Cromwell Johnson, argued during trial that Andrea's body had actually never been dropped in the lake and that Paul had actually disposed of her body somewhere else.
And we're hearing that, aren't we? We're hearing that from people.
Well, yes, that's actually, since we posted Andrea's card, that's been something that people have commented, that they've heard he worked construction at the time and that she may be buried under one of the homes that he was working on at the time.
We've also heard the mine shaft story too.
And I think just like we'll go through, I think there are some comments in Kim's statement that kind of support this whole idea that she may never have been put in the lake.
Yeah.
Kim was incarcerated at the Julia Tutwiler Women's Prison to serve her time, and she was released in November of 2001. However, Kim's troubles continued to follow her beyond her release. In 2003, a motorist found Kim's 8-year-old son walking down Waterloo Road at 4:30 a.m. Authorities claimed he was hallucinating and disoriented when they found him, and they took him to Russellville Hospital's emergency room for examination. He told authorities he'd been staying in the area with his mother and sister, but Kim's parents actually had legal custody of the kids because Kim had been in jail. So I'm not sure they were actually supposed to be with her anyway.
They weren't. They were supposed to have like visitations, but they were not supposed to be staying with her.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, that, I'm not really sure you get your kids back when you've been convicted of child abuse. And then when authorities arrived to question Kim, they found she had controlled substances in her possession. She claimed they were prescribed. And then I think everything just kind of continued on that downward trend.
Yeah.
You were telling me about an incident earlier.
She was...
That had occurred.
Yeah, she... Gosh, I'm trying to remember what the year was. I want to say it was in 2011, I believe, that she was actually picked up on a warrant. She had a previous shoplifting charge, and I don't know, I guess she didn't report in, or not sure how that all, she may have been out on bond or something. But anyway, she had a warrant out for this previous charge, and then was held on what they said several felony and misdemeanor charges. And part of that was because of her resisting arrest. And when she was in the jail itself, she actually more or less assaulted an officer. She was actually trying to steal some Lortab drugs. And I'm assuming from the infirmary or something. And when they thought she was under control, she went to grab them, and I guess one or two of the tablets dropped on the floor. And when he kind of gave her an opportunity unknowingly, she dived for it. And so then they had to argue with her more. And she actually ended up slamming his head into the end of the bed or something. So, yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, she's a little bit of a mess at this point.
It sounds like maybe drugs definitely played an issue.
Yeah. And
into some things.
And I think it's...
So
when people
maybe there was some truth about the abuse. She abused pills.
It could be. It could also be... I'm not making any excuses for her. She probably was. She probably had problems for a long time with that. I know that a lot of people who are in abusive situations, they tend to lean on that. And, with everything that happened, I'm sure it just
kind of
got
like
worse.
A coping.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I'm sure, life as a felon isn't, peachy keen. So we have a lot more to discuss on the next episode. Just after this bit, there's a lot to unpack just from this. But like we said, we have all these court records that we're going to go through and try to bring you as much of that information as we can.
And follow up on the comments that you guys have left.
Yes. And hopefully maybe some more of you will come forward with a little bit of information. I want to leave you, I guess, with this. In an article on the 20th year of Andrea's disappearance, Chief of Police Chris Hargett said, "It's always in the back of your mind. I try not to dwell on it because I do believe that we did everything we could to find her." And I also remember seeing in another article that this case actually touched the chief of police. It touched the sheriff's office. And I believe it was in front of the sheriff's office that they ended up putting a memorial for her.
I saw that too. And he actually had one of the nicest things to say about it. A comment that he gave to the media said, "One of the last things in human customs is a burial. And at that point, you've done all you can do as a human. This child never got that."
She never got her resting place, and this is the closest they could give her.
Oh, that just...
I know. It does. It gets you. It makes me feel... I don't even really have the words for it. It just makes me feel so awful for this child. And child cases always get me. If you have any information that can be used for Andrea's case to try to bring her some justice finally, any little piece of information whatsoever, big, small, you don't even think it has anything to do with the case, but it's just a tidbit of something that you remember hearing in passing, anything, please bring that forward and contact the Franklin County Sheriff's Office at 256-332-8811. And as always, you can contact us via our website or on our Facebook page by messaging. And just come forward, please. We want to help bring Andrea back her dignity and justice.
Since Alabama Cold Case Advocacy's creation, we have dedicated innumerable hours to researching and networking in an effort to provide the largest platform we can to the cases we share. We shoulder all associated expenses with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy out of our own pocket, including the subscription fees for researching and production of the Unforgotten podcast to provide a cost-free avenue for the victims' families of those cases.
We hope you will join in our efforts to raise awareness of Alabama's missing and murdered and support these families who have been forced to carry the immeasurable loss of their loved ones and the fight for answers. If you appreciate our mission and you are inspired to make a donation, your extra support will enable the ACCA to continue our research, share the cold cases, and help those families know that they are also unforgotten.
Unforgotten is an Alabama Cold Case Advocacy podcast recorded in conjunction with Riverside FM, hosted and distributed by Spotify for podcasters, available on your favorite podcast platform. Intro music for the show was created by Principles of Uncertainty, who also mixed and mastered this episode. Content and production is by Sellers and Stormy. Artwork by Sellers. Credits for music, sound clips, special mentions, and any source referenced in our podcast can be found in each episode's description. We hope you will join us on all the major social media sites and continue to raise awareness of our Alabama cold cases. Until next time, thank you for listening, and remember, justice may be delayed, but the victims and their families remain unforgotten.